Hello, this is Skill and Kelso with the Grim Reapers. We're here today to conduct a hardware review on Winwing's new Main Instrument Panel, or MIP, for the FA-18C Hornet. As usual, all of the hardware was sent to us at no charge. Winwing has never asked for a favorable review, just an honest one. Skill was sent the Phoenix version of the MIP, which does not have screens for the multifunction displays, or MFD. If I don't say this here, the internet police will get me, so here goes. In the Hornet, the left and right upper screen units are digital display indicators, or DDI, and they don't have the off/BRT knobs at the top. The lower center unit is an advanced multipurpose color display, AMPCD. So, that's enough acronyms for one lifetime. Our list of topics will be unboxing, downloading files, assembly, SimApp Pro, the Top Gun kit using the FA-18C and F-16C, and the Phoenix kit using the AH-64 in VR, pricing, and comments.
I'll very quickly run through the unboxing. Winwing usually ship everything in individual boxes, but in the case of the MIPs, they have shipped it as a kit, all contained in one large outer box. As you can see, the outer box is marked to show the contents. Inside, you will find that the components are contained within their own individual boxes, which are again marked clearly to show what is inside each one. As with all of the Winwing products I have had delivered previously, I found everything to be very well packaged and protected in a firmish foam packing material to prevent any damage. As soon as I started removing the actual parts from the packaging, my initial impression was that everything was of a top of the line quality, but we'll talk more about that later. Once I had everything unboxed, I ended up with quite a lot of parts, as you can see here.
And here's the Top Gun kit. If you have screens, download and install the MFD display driver. Next, download and read all the manuals and guides. Assembly will require that you have all documents open. Follow each carefully and it will reduce your pain. Skill and I highly recommend the Sabrent line of powered USB 3.0 data hubs. They come in 7, 10, and 16 port models. We've used them for over 2 years with zero problems. Download and install SimApp Pro. Log in using your Winwing ID and password. Systematically activate each device and update them as required. Make sure all other USB devices are disabled. Be patient and methodical, as having more than one device active when updating will be very bad. When complete, you may want to do a restart with all devices active. I started with the MFDs and used the left MFD, right MFD, and center MFD buttons to identify each one in the app, which will also identify them in DCS during binding. I tested and configured the MFDs before moving to the UFC and HUD. I configured the MFD displays last. As you can see, as of this date, there are 3 DCS aircraft that are available to activate based on which you intend to fly. SimApp Pro must be running in the background to sync telemetry from DCS. It does not require that you stay logged in though, just keep it running in the background. Here we see a picture-in-a-picture of the Top Gun kit using the FA-18C Hornet. Both Skill and I spent up to 5 days each trying to build a nice cinematic presentation using several different weapon sets and scenarios to show a typical mission using loadout, takeoff, CCIP bomb delivery, air-to-air refueling, and carrier landings. Ultimately, none of that worked as it took too long. People are viewing the video to see the close-up of the hardware and in-cockpit views. As you see here, the HUD module below the UFC is a bit brighter than the other components. It ain't easy making videos. The input telemetry and timing is pretty spot on, matching all control inputs. The buttons, rockers, dials, and switches had all positive tactile feedback. Here we see a picture-in-a-picture of the Top Gun kit using the F-16 Viper. If you remember from the SimApp Pro section, one must activate the appropriate aircraft. This is my second favorite jet in the DCS lineup. Hence, I don't fly it much at the moment, and I'm sure Skill will laugh at the lame hunt and peck method of demonstrating the MFDs. I didn't have time to investigate binding the UFC to any of the F-16's ICP controls. I was impressed with the HSI presentation and used the HUD's heading and course switches to activate those controls. The F-16 video was the final video I made last night before I called it a day. I tried to fly a Hornet strike mission and had a few minutes of panic before discovering I had failed to reactivate the Hornet's MFD in SimApp Pro. So, I'm sure none of you will do that.
I know Kelso will be going over setting up and using the UFC, HUD controller, MFDs and display screens of the Top Gun MIP with the Hornet. I have set up my Phoenix kit for the Hornet too, and clearly, as this is the aircraft that these controls are based on, it is absolutely fantastic for that. But I have been going through and setting them up for other aircraft as well. The one aircraft in DCS that really demands a lot from MFDs is the AH-64 Apache. I have previously tried mapping my old Cougar MFDs to this, however, this has had limited success due to the fact that they have simply not enough buttons. The Winwing MFDs have a trick up their sleeve though, and that is that, excluding the rocker style buttons on the corners for the likes of contrast and gain, they have 9 buttons along each side of the frame. They have managed this by adding stealth buttons in between each of the normal buttons. So with having the 9 buttons along each side of the frame, there are now more than enough to map all of the buttons on the Apache MFDs. I've even used the 2 upper buttons on the front of the UFC as the Master Caution and Master Warning reset buttons. My original plan was to film myself using the Winwing MIP whilst flying the Apache in VR, but the assembled unit is simply so large that it proved impossible to get a decent recording angle to cover all of the inputs, so instead I have included some picture-in-picture footage of me simply pressing some of the buttons on the MFDs and their corresponding inputs in the game.
Here is the current pricing for the different MIP configurations. As you can see, our hobby can get pricey. I recommend you spend some time researching the available options and prices. My research indicates Winwing's features and prices are competitive. Okay folks, I'm here with Skill, and let's just push through with pros. What'd you think?
Okay Kelso, I have a few things to mention here. As I said during the unboxing, my initial impressions was that the UFC, HUD controller and MFDs felt great. The materials used in the build quality feel top of the range, with the rotaries, encoders and switches all feeling solid and expensive. The mounts are also solid feeling and more than sufficient for holding everything in place. I also do like that Winwing have taken other mounting solutions into consideration with their design, and the units can be mounted using extrusion-based mounting systems such as Predator mounts and Monster Tech. The extra stealth buttons on the MFDs add a great deal of versatility to them, especially compared to other types of similar devices. The extra 3 rocker type buttons on top of the UFC also give the option to have extra controls. For instance, I use the centre one for recentering my VR headset and for VR zoom. I use the left hand one for opening and closing canopies on various aircraft. As always, for me, using real one-to-one scale controls in VR adds that extra level of immersion.
Skill, I agree with everything you said and have nothing to add. How about cons?
The first one I had has already been addressed and corrected by Winwing, and it was simply that when I first received the MIP, all 3 MFDs were identified in SimApp Pro and in DCS as Winwing MFD. There was no way of knowing which one was which, and that made binding the controls interesting. They have now fixed that, and they are identified clearly as left, right and centre MFD. Honestly, I only have a couple of remaining minor cons, and they're both button related. As I said, the hardware all feels top of the line. The buttons on the UFC and MFDs all feel like a kind of rubbery silicone type material, which is not bad. However, the button press on the MFDs just feels a bit mushy to me. I prefer a button press to have a nice haptic, clicky feedback so that you know when you've pushed it. The buttons on the MFDs don't have this. It's not that they feel bad, and it's entirely a personal preference kind of thing. I just prefer more clicky buttons. The buttons on the UFC do have a bit more of a click to them, so they feel a little bit better to me. My only other real bugbear is on behalf of all VR users. The Phoenix MIP kit is specifically aimed at VR users, so I would have liked to have seen Winwing add some kind of tactile dimples or something similar to specific buttons on the MFDs so that you can locate which button your finger is on quickly and by feel. I know that some other MFD manufacturers have those, and I think it's a real benefit to VR users. Having said that, it doesn't take much effort to stick some Velcro tabs to the buttons like I do, so as I say, it's just a minor thing from me.
Well, Skill, I guess I'm going to be your yes man today, as I agree with your assessment there as well. To keep this brief, we both give a thumbs up to the MIP from Winwing. We hope we've provided enough information to make an informed decision. As always, we hope you search for other reviews, as we may have missed something. Thank you for taking the time to watch.